there comes a strange moment. Maybe in the middle of a crowded street, or while staring into the bathroom mirror, when you suddenly realize you don't know who you are. You can list your name, your job, your history, but something deeper slips through your fingers. You feel yourself watching your own performance. The polite smile, the clever reply, the curated personality you've built like armor. And then the question hits you, quiet but devastating. Who is playing this role? And where did the real me go? Alan Watts once described this moment as the great joke of life. The cosmic game, he said, is that we are God pretending not to be God, infinite consciousness disguised as a person with problems, titles, and fears. But most of us forget it's a disguise. We start taking our masks as faces. From childhood, we were taught to construct an identity. We learned what pleased others, what gained approval, what earned love. Bit by bit, we assembled a self out of reflections, a collage of expectations. Be responsible, be successful, be someone. But what saw through the illusion? The person, he said, is a mask, from the Latin persona, the mask through which sound comes. We mistake the voice that echoes through it for who we are. The modern self is a performance under surveillance. Every gesture is an advertisement. Every thought filtered through the lens of how it will appear. In a world obsessed with becoming somebody, to be nobody feels like a failure. Yet what's called it liberation? Because the self we cling to is the very source of our suffering, a fragile fiction that must constantly prove its own reality. Consider how exhausting this act is. Every interaction subtly calibrated, every opinion rehearsed, every silence filled out of fear that others might see through the act and find nothing. But that nothing, what reminds us, is not emptiness. It is freedom. The ego's disappearance is not annihilation. It's awakening. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But what if who you truly are has no fixed boundaries? What if your real self is not a solid someone, but the open awareness in which all someones appear and dissolve? What's loved to use metaphors of the sea? The individual is not a separate wave, but the ocean itself expressing in unique form. The wave's mistake is to think it must maintain its crest forever, to resist its own return. Likewise, we fear being nobody because it feels like death. But for Watts, it was rebirth, the dissolving of the illusion of separation between self and reality. The tragedy of the modern world is that everyone is trying to be significant in a universe that never asked for significance. We run from insignificance as though it were shameful. We build digital monuments, names, brands, legacies, desperate to be seen. But as Watts laughed, you are the universe pretending to be a person. What more significance could you want? To be nobody is to remember that the wind does not strive to impress the trees, nor the stars compete for brightness. Existence simply is effortless, unself-conscious, complete. The human tragedy is the refusal to participate in that simplicity. We have become anxious gods pretending to be broken mortals. The art of being nobody is not about rejection or apathy. It's not withdrawal from life, but the deepest participation in it, free from the compulsive need to define, defend, and decorate a self that never truly existed. Because beneath every ambition, every fear, every need to be loved, there is the same quiet truth waiting to be remembered. You were never just the mask. And when that realization dawns, even for a moment, something begins to crack. Not in despair, but in relief. The role collapses, the mask slips, and for the first time, perhaps, you breathe not as a character, but as consciousness itself. But what happens when the mask refuses to come off? When the need to be someone is so deeply woven into our bones that the thought of being nobody feels unbearable. That's where the real paradox begins, and where what's most unsettling truth takes root. The idea of being nobody sounds liberating, until you actually begin to feel it. Then it becomes terrifying, because everything you've ever known about yourself begins to loosen. The voice in your head, the constant narrator telling the story of me, starts to lose authority. And suddenly, you're no longer sure what's left. Most people would rather cling to the pain of being somebody than face the void of being nobody. The ego, fragile as it is, would rather suffer than vanish. That's why, When you start to see through it, fear rises like a dark tide. What's understood this with eerie precision? Ego, he said, is nothing other than the focus of conscious attention, and the moment attention relaxes its grip, the illusion starts to tremble. We've built entire civilizations around the preservation of this illusion. Our education teaches competition, our economy rewards distinction, and our technology amplifies our self-image into digital eternity. Every selfie, every opinion, every online declaration is another stitch holding the identity together. But what's asked the forbidden question? What if the self we protect so desperately is only a mirage in consciousness, a dream the universe is having about being you? To the ego, that idea is unbearable, because the ego's first instinct is survival. It doesn't want to be seen as an idea. It wants to be real. It wants to matter. And so, it multiplies stories. I'm a thinker. I'm a good person. I'm a failure. I'm not enough. It doesn't matter whether the story is grand or tragic, as long as there's someone at the center of it. This is the cruel paradox of selfhood. The very structure that gives us identity is also what imprisons us. To say, I am this, is to exclude everything you are not. It creates a border between me and not me. But consciousness itself has no borders. It's like drawing a circle on water. The line never holds. What's once compared the ego to a clenched fist. The tighter we grasp at who we think we are, the more pain we create. But when the hand opens, there's nothing left to hold, and that's when freedom begins. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once said, "The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all." We are taught to fear this loss, but perhaps what we truly fear is not losing ourselves, but losing the illusion that we ever had one. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast ocean. The horizon stretches beyond sight, and somewhere within you feel the pull, the call to dissolve into that immensity. But your mind resists. It whispers, "Don't go. You'll disappear. You'll lose everything that makes you you." What would smile gently at that fear? "Of course," he'd say, "you'll lose it, but that's only because it was never really yours." The fear of being nobody is the last defense of the mind before awakening. It's the body's reaction to infinity, like a candle trembling before the dawn. To embrace being nobody is to allow yourself to vanish into what's always been there, awareness without a center, life without the storyteller. But we resist. We build identities out of everything, careers, relationships, even spirituality itself. We turn enlightenment into another trophy, another, "I am someone who is awakening." And what's ever the trickster would laugh at that too. Because even in trying to let go of the self finds a way to sneak back in, disguised as the one who's letting go. That's the cosmic joke, the spiritual ego, the seeker chasing the idea of being nobody, all while secretly wanting to be somebody who has mastered the art of nobody. The paradox is not something to solve, but to see. Because the moment you recognize the self's desperate need to survive, even in its own disappearance, you begin to laugh too. You see the absurdity, and in that laughter, something relaxes. The self starts to uncoil. The tension of needing to be begins to melt. And in that stillness, you glimpse something vast and tender. The silence before the story begins. To truly be nobody, you must pass through this fear. Not destroy it, not deny it, but see it for what it is. The final illusion guarding the door to freedom. And beyond that door waits something ancient and familiar, the realization that you were never separate from the whole. There's a moment when the curtain begins to lift. Not all at once, just a faint shimmer at the edges of your perception. Something softens. The endless chatter of the mind, once deafening, loses its grip. You begin to see your thoughts not as absolute truths, but as passing clouds against a vast, silent sky. This is where Alan Watts invited us to look, not at the content of our lives, but at the context in which life unfolds. Behind every opinion, every emotion, every story of who we think we are, there is something constant and untouched, the awareness that witnesses it all. That awareness, Watts said, is who you truly are. The rest is costume. But this realization doesn't arrive as a thunderbolt of enlightenment. It comes quietly, like dawn creeping over a sleeping city. One day, you're caught in the usual cycle, craving validation, comparing yourself, defending your importance, and suddenly you catch yourself doing it. You see the performance for what it is. It's like watching a puppet show and realizing you've been both puppet and puppeteer the whole time. The illusion starts to unravel, not through effort, but through seeing. What's often described awakening as a joke we finally get. For years, you've taken yourself so seriously, your ambitions, your failures, your drama. Then one day you laugh, not mockingly, but with deep relief, because you realize that the entire performance was never real. It was consciousness playing a game of hide and seek with itself. Man suffers only because he takes seriously what the gods made for fun, Alan Watts once said. And in that sentence lies the heart of the awakening, the realization that existence is not a problem to be solved, but a dance to be joined. It's the great cosmic comedy. Life pretending to be a person trying to make sense of life. When the illusion begins to fade, what replaces it is not emptiness, but wonder. You start to notice how effortless everything is when you stop trying to control it. Breathing happens, thoughts arise, the sun sets, the wind moves. You begin to see that existence flows on its own, and you are that flow. You are not the thinker of thoughts, but the space in which thoughts appear. Not the doer of actions, but the awareness within which doing unfolds. It's a quiet revolution, a reversal of identification. The center of gravity shifts from the story to the storyteller, from the wave to the ocean. The ego may still whisper, but now you see it for what it is. A pattern, a habit, a voice without substance. And in this seeing, compassion awakens. You stop judging yourself for being human, for having an ego, for falling back into illusion. You see that even the game of pretending to be somebody is part of the play. The philosopher Lao Tzu captured this paradox beautifully. When I let go of who I am, I become what I might be. To let go of who you are does not mean to abandon your personality or memories. It means to stop clinging to them as the totality of your being. You can still play your role, the artist, the teacher, the friend, but you no longer mistake the role for the actor. You become free to move through the world lightly, without the desperate need for validation. Watts often compared this state to music. Life, he said, is not a journey to a destination, but a song to be danced. You don't dance to arrive somewhere. You dance because the movement itself is the point. When you forget that, life becomes a struggle, a series of tasks toward a horizon that never arrives. But when you remember it, everything becomes radiant again. This is the awakening, realizing that there was never anything to attain. You were never lost, only dreaming of being separate. The art of being nobody is the art of remembering that you are already everything. And yet, even here, the paradox deepens. Because as soon as you realize you are everything, a strange humility arises. The boundaries dissolve, and so does the pride of being awakened. The drop that realizes it is the ocean does not become grand. It becomes silent. For the first time, there is peace, not the peace of achievement, but the peace of recognition. The world has not changed, but your relationship to it has. The seeking has ended. The dance goes on. When the self dissolves, life doesn't vanish, it blooms. You begin to see that everything was always alive, always shimmering, always enough. You were simply too busy narrating your existence to notice it. The birds were still singing, the leaves were still trembling in the light, the waves were still kissing the shore. Only now you are no longer standing apart from them, naming, labeling, or comparing. You are the seeing itself. There is a peculiar kind of beauty that comes when the need to be someone fades away. The world loses its sharp edges. Things no longer exist in relation to your preferences, they simply are. And in that simplicity, there's a holiness that words cannot reach. Alan Watts described this state not as detachment, but as participation without anxiety. You are fully immersed in the unfolding of each moment, but you don't clutch at it. You love, but you do not demand permanence. You create, but you do not grasp at results. You experience, but you do not insist on meaning. Life flows through you as effortlessly as wine through open hands. It's here that the art of being nobody reveals its secret, that non-existence, as the ego understands it, is not nihilism. It is not an erasure of life, but its fulfillment. The self was never the point. It was merely a lens, and now that the glass has cleared, you can finally see. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "I have learned to walk. Since then I let myself run. I have learned to fly. Since then I do not need to be pushed in order to move." That is what it means to live without a center. There is no longer a you at the helm, trying to steer reality into submission. The movement happens of itself. The universe breathes you, just as it breathes the stars. And yet, this dissolution of self does not make you passive. Paradoxically, it makes you more alive. Without the constant interference of egoic judgment, you act with spontaneous wisdom. You speak when it is time to speak, you are silent when silence is called for. You love without fear of loss, because there is no one left to lose anything. This is what Watts meant when he said that the true sage is not busy being wise. He doesn't cling to identity, not even the identity of enlightenment. His laughter is pure, not because life is easy, but because he no longer insists that it must be otherwise. When the mind stops dividing experience into success and failure, gain and loss, meaning and meaninglessness, the world becomes astonishingly intimate. Every ordinary thing becomes a miracle, the curve of a shadow, the breath before words, the sound of rain. You begin to see that the same consciousness that looked through your eyes also looks through the eyes of the stranger, the bird, the passing cloud. In disappearing, you discover belonging. There is a line from the mystic Rumi that captures this perfectly. "I searched for God and found only myself. I searched for myself and found only God." That is the beauty of disappearing, the discovery that the self you were protecting all along was only a doorway. When it falls away, what remains is not absence, but presence. Unbounded, luminous, free. You realize that even pain and uncertainty have their place in the dance. Suffering, too, becomes holy when you no longer resist it. The rain does not ask to be sunshine. The night does not apologize for the dawn. Everything belongs because nothing stands apart. To live without a center is to live without the shadow of self-importance. It is to exist as the wind exists, moving without destination, yet touching everything. You stop trying to justify your existence, because existence itself is its own justification. And strangely, this disappearance gives rise to the deepest compassion. When you no longer see yourself as separate, you no longer see others as enemies or obstacles. Their joys and sorrows are your own. You can look into the eyes of another and see eternity peering back. The art of being nobody is, at last, the art of being everything. When you stop insisting on being the author of life, life begins to write through you. And what it writes is always beautiful, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. There comes a point when even the idea of awakening fades, when the mind no longer tries to measure how far it's come, or whether it's there yet. The seeker dissolves into the sought. The river has met the sea. What remains is an unspeakable stillness. Not empty, not full, but vast and selfless, like the silence after a symphony that leaves the listener trembling. Alan Watts called this the point of no return, though not in the sense of loss. It's the moment when the illusion of control finally collapses and you fall freely, fearlessly, into the truth that you were never falling at all. Life has always been carrying you. To live as nobody is to live without resistance. You stop defending the narrative, stop performing meaning. You become transparent, not because you disappear, but because there's nothing left to hide. The self that once stood between you and the world dissolves like mist in morning light, revealing what was always there, the unbroken intimacy of existence with itself. At first, this might sound like surrender, as if one has given up on life. But it is the opposite. Surrender is not defeat, it's trust. It's the recognition that the universe is infinitely wiser than the plans we keep scribbling across its surface. Watts would often say that to awaken is to realize you're not a stranger in the cosmos. You are the cosmos. The galaxies are your body, the tides your breath, the trees your veins. You are not standing in the universe. You are unfolding as the universe. In this recognition, fear loses its foundation. What can death mean to the ocean when a single wave fades? What can loss mean to the sky when clouds pass? The disappearance of form is not tragedy, it's transformation. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote, "Man can indeed do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." What's loved that insight? Because it revealed the absurdity of the ego's claim to be in control. We never chose to be born, to breathe, to fall in love, to grieve. Life has always been happening through us. And when you finally see that, the burden lifts. The great anxiety of "what should I do?" gives way to the simplicity of "let it be." But this freedom is not passive. It's alive with spontaneity. You act not from obligation, but from alignment. Your actions become expressions of the whole, like wind moving through grass or fire consuming air. The old question, "Who am I?" transforms into a gentle knowing, "I am." There's no pride in this, no need to declare enlightenment. In fact, those who truly awaken rarely speak of it, because they see that there was never anyone to awaken. As the Zen saying goes, "When I heard the sound of the bell ringing, there was no bell, and no I, only the ringing." This is what's meant by the art of being nobody. It's not the erasure of individuality, but the transcendence of isolation. You still walk, eat, laugh, make mistakes, but now everything happens in the light of awareness. Even sorrow is no longer exile. It's part of the dance. And then one day, you find yourself gazing at a sunset, the sky bleeding with color, the wind breathing across your skin, and you realize there's no watcher left. There's just the pure immediacy of existence. No division between the seer and the seen. No need to name it, to own it, to preserve it. In that moment, you understand what's meant when he said, "You are the universe experiencing itself, for the sheer delight of being." To be nobody is to be free, free from the tyranny of importance, free from the ache of comparison, free from the endless search for meaning. Because meaning is not something to find. It's something that is. It's the pulse of being itself. The journey ends where it began, right here in the ordinary miracle of awareness. The seeker's map burns away. The last trace of I dissolves into the quiet rhythm of breath, the sound of leaves, the hum of existence going on as it always has. There's no enlightenment waiting on the horizon. There's only this life, raw and unfiltered, as vast as it is intimate. The art of being nobody is not a philosophy to learn, but a truth to remember. You were never the mask, never the story, never the actor. You were always the stage, the play, the silence in which it unfolds. And when that truth settles into your bones, the world doesn't vanish. It becomes luminous. Every sound, every motion, every fleeting instant becomes sacred, because at last, there is no one left to lose it. There is only what is, only the infinite, shimmering presence of now, and the quiet laughter of the universe, remembering itself.